Hi, my name is Junko Yoshida. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Ojo Yoshida Report. Today, we have this special session with Tenstorrent. We've got the guest, David Bennett, who is the Chief Customer Officer at Tenstorrent. And we're going to talk about chiplets. But before we get there, I'd like to introduce who else is in the room. And with me, there's Ron Wilson. He is a technology editor for the Ojo Yoshida Report. And we decided, Ron and I will tag team to ask questions to David because, Tenstorrent is such a hot company. And we have seen the number of announcements that the Tenstorrent made on chiplets over the last, 12 months, 10 months. So this is a good time to revisit why chiplets for a startup like Tenstorrent. I think it's I wouldn't call it overreaching, but I think there must be a deep strategy behind it. So let's start from why chiplet question, David.
That's a great question. First of all, Junko, nice to see you on as well. It's a great question. So, as you said, Tenstorrent, we're doing a lot of things, and every once in a while, a customer or recently, more likely, an investor will ask me, "Hey, you guys are a startup. How come you're doing so many things? Are you focused on too much? How come you're not focused on one thing?" So, even before we get to chiplets, let me kind of address that because I think it plays into our
That's
strategy
a good
quite
idea.
well.
Yes.
So if you look at what Tenstorrent is doing, from a hardware perspective, we are releasing our own AI accelerator, and we're using this to compete. Well, in some ways, we're competing against NVIDIA. In some ways, I think we're doing something very different. But we're certainly looking to sell our hardware to data center customers, and we have an accelerator that, unlike a GPU, but still goes in the data center. Now, when you look at that, to actually go and manufacture an accelerator that will go into a server or go into our ultra dense server we call a Galaxy, which is not dissimilar to NVIDIA's DGX. Let's look at everything you have to do. You've got to go create the IP. And we're choosing to create both the AI IP that we need, but also RISC-V to go power that. We've chosen to take that IP and put it into chiplets. We take those chiplets and we compose them into an SoC. We take that SoC and then we put it into a PCI card or a module that goes into workstations and servers. And then we have to design the software to make it all work. So first and foremost, and I'll come back to chiplets in a second, but to produce and sell the hardware that we are selling, we've got to do all these steps anyways. I think the big difference with Tenstorrent, and frankly one of our big advantages, is unlike sort of the legacy players, ARM in the IP space and AMD, NVIDIA, Intel in the hardware space, we don't have these legacy customers or these legacy requirements. And we can go sell every part of that stack that we're going to have to be working on anyways. So what that means is we've got a very robust portfolio of, we can sell IP, we can sell AI, we can sell RISC-V, we know how to get them to work together. We can do all of that end to end. And what that means for the customer is they can get the technology in any way they want. So I don't think it's a distraction. In fact, I think it's more of an advantage because we're able to then monetize every part of our stack on something we would have had to do anyways. Now, that goes back to your question around chiplets. We believe, and we've chosen to, in our next generation, our current black hole generation that we've announced and is just powered on, isn't in the lab, is kind of our final traditional SoC. Moving forward, our next generation is going to be comprised of these chiplets, which we've been working on for the past 2.5 years. And that goes back to our story around composability, right? We've seen AMD do wonderful things with their kind of chiplet design. And we also have a strong belief that, when it comes to AI, no one's quite sure what the future holds, right? The models of today, within 3 months or 6 months, they're deprecated. Models that we think are going to be really popular all of a sudden aren't. And now the transformer obviously is extremely important. But that ratio of compute and acceleration is always changing. And I think to future-proof your technology, what we've come to the conclusion is chiplets allows us internally, when we're making our products, to quickly rebalance that ratio of compute and acceleration. And then there's the offshoot. It allows us to do a lot of interesting things for our customers.
Right. Well, that's a good overview, and but at the same time, it actually touches upon different things. In other words, that AI is not set,
No,
right? And we have to deal with this fact very flexibly, and that's, I think, part of the reason why chiplet comes in handy. But at the same time, chiplet itself is not matured yet,
correct.
right?
Yeah.
So when you think all those elements, well, I wouldn't call it unknown, but it's not so certain elements if you consider them all together. Is chiplet something that you must have technology for Tenstorrent?
Yeah,
And
it's a,
that's what the customer is asking.
yeah, it's a good question. So I think if you look at AMD is a great example, right? They've used chiplets internally, I think, to be extremely successful. They've been able to diversify the products that they can bring to market, both reducing costs and sort of in a very short time frame. I think we see that same opportunity. I think the challenge is, so for our internal products, I think it's a no-brainer. And I think it's because it allows, if we look at the philosophy of Tenstorrent, our AI IP, our little 10.6 cores in itself are very modular. And then we've created, scalability is one of our big stories. We're able to stack these chips on top of each other with our, Ethernet layer fabric, and able to kind of expand like that. So this composability story is kind of going through all of our product lines. And what chiplets allows us to do, as I said, is we can very quickly change that ratio of compute and AI, as we move through our different product generations. So do I think it's a must? I think with a company like Tenstorrent, where we're developing our own compute, we're developing our own AI engine, we're actually going as far to develop the memory controller, the I/O. We're going to kind of have all the pieces of this chiplet puzzle. So for us, that flexibility is extremely important as we start to bring different technologies or different products to market. That flexibility is really important for what we want to do. We can get into the what that means for our customers, but ultimately what it means is, just like our 10.6 cores and our IP, they're little Lego blocks. And we believe that if we size them the right size, their usefulness becomes extremely important. So by creating these AI chiplet, the RISC-V chiplet, the I/O chiplet, the networking, the memory chiplets, we can then compose them in the way that we want. But also, when our customers come to us and ask us to build something with them or for them, all of a sudden we've got these right size Lego blocks to go and make a variety of products that otherwise would take 3 to 4 years to sort of go down the traditional SoC path.
One of the things I'm kind of curious about, the cynic's way of looking at a chiplet-based architecture is to say it's a way of introducing a large number of unpredictable bottlenecks into an otherwise working system. How much system modeling do you have to do to be sure you have those right-sized blocks and that the pretty extreme constraints of the point-to-point interconnect on a silicon substrate aren't going to limit you to just one architecture anyway?
Yeah, so no, I think it's a good question. I think that's why when you're developing it internally, you have to have, I think the resources in the right team because there's simulation, there's modeling, there's a whole bunch of work to make sure that, as you said, these first of all, that the interconnects are working with each other. You've got the right bandwidth, you've got the right space. But then when you put them together in a package, when you look at thermal constraints, when you look at size of the packaging, there's a whole bunch of stuff that comes into play. So that is a lot of work. I think that's probably one of the reasons why a kind of a sort of a general. I know that UCIe. There's a bunch of folks that are trying to do these standardizations to make sort of this dream of having chiplets work across multiple customers. We certainly believe that's possible, but I think Jim has gone on record saying, and I think the entire team agrees very strongly, is that the first couple generations are going to be really tough, and there's a lot of work that needs to go internally even to get a single design working. I think then to sort of extrapolate that and have all these pieces working together, there's still going to be a lot of, frankly, simulation required with our customers. There's still a lot of work there, but I think for an internal design, if you have the right team and you're putting the amount of resources and time in, so far we've seen it, for us, it's been more of an advantage than a disadvantage.
I guess that raises another question for me. You mentioned that there's an awful lot of work between having a chiplet and having a system, and that it tends to be design specific. Is there really a chiplet market that you can tap into at this point with one slice of your stack? Or is the chiplet just kind of an advertising medium for a joint development?
Yeah, Ron, that's I think probably a great question, the great question, right? I think that everyone's looking at. And here's how I look at it. Today, I don't think that ecosystem exists. I think, like I keep mentioning AMD, I think they've done it all internally and it's worked out really well for them. Intel, I think, is starting to. So for our design, as I said, if you look at the way we've structured all of our products from the IP even to the system level, this sort of scalability is important to us. So, from our philosophy, our ethos, this scalability and this composability of our IP, composability of our systems with Galaxy and our cards, but also composability of our chiplets is important to us. And again, that goes to the AI workload is a little unpredictable in terms of, even training versus inference. You've got sort of compute constraints versus memory constraints as new models come out. So it's important to have that flexibility. But I think, if you look at, does that ecosystem exist today? No. Now, I think Tenstorrent has a bit of an advantage because, well, two things. One is we're developing the compute chiplet and the AI chiplet, which is kind of like the old CPU in a traditional SoC, right? It's the brains. It's arguably one of the most important parts of that SoC, that fully chiplet design. So I would say that's kind of the hard part and the part that we've really got to nail. Now, we're working with a number of partners. We were hoping to kind of pick up one of the other, startups or other companies' chiplets and like the IO chiplet or the memory chiplet and bring them in. That was the original plan. What we found is, to your point, Ron, is that ecosystem is not mature enough. So we've actually had to go out and we've made the decision to build our own memory chiplet, build our own IO chiplet, which was not part of the original plan. And I think the way we're looking at it is there is no ecosystem now. There's some standard, we see the standardization bodies like UCIe, there was a bunch of wires. These folks were all trying to do different things. I think our goal is we are going, just like AMD, we're going to make our product ready with chiplets. We're going to have all the major pieces. We're going to do 90% of the design in-house. But by having compute, by having AI, by having a number of memory, HBM, LPDDR, DDR, by having the IO chiplets, once we create them for our product and we can sort of define that internally and working with the standard guys, we think that there will be an opportunity for other companies that want to then take our chiplets and do something with them. We believe we have a little bit of control over our own destiny there because by then we would have put it in a package that we have up and running, we have working, and we can show the market, well, hey, this is not just we're not just making one chiplet, go use it and make something great. We're saying we already have a product that we've made with a number of chiplets. We know it works. We know how to integrate them. So we can be your partner on that journey.
From the business market point of view, though, what sort of requests are you getting? I think one of the key takeaways in the first 5 minutes of this discussion was the use of the word composability. And I understand that why that is important in the realm of chiplets. But let's hear, what are you hearing from your customers? Well, actually, you made several announcements, and one of which was picking Samsung Foundry as your foundry, the company who manufactures your chiplets, right? But tell us a little bit about the potential customers or customers who have specifically requested chiplet solution.
So okay. I've got three answers, and probably some of them will be unpopular. But the first one, just to correct something you said, Junko. So one thing Tenstorrent prides itself on is we choose the right foundry partner for the right product, and that changes. So we have, Samsung is an investor. We've got a great partnership with them. We have publicly announced that we're doing a few, I think one or two chiplets with them. We publicly announced. But I want to be clear. We've also made an announcement. We're working with Rapidus. Our latest black hole product is coming out from another very large, very well-known foundry. So to be clear, we have great partnerships with all of the ecosystem, and I think that's important. Number two, from our customers. So actually, before I answer the third one, the second one I was going to say was, I'm responsible for the revenue and the sales and the partnerships. So part of me, we have a lot of announcements around chiplets. We have a lot of announcements around automotive. Long term, that's a great strategy. The guy that's responsible for revenue in the next 2 years wants to run away screaming because these are so far away in terms of, actualizing revenue that it's a little daunting. But I'll tell you, I've been shocked at the number of customers that are coming to us and saying they want to participate in this chiplet ecosystem. To Ron's point, it's not just a marketing slogan that we can put on. These are customers paying us real money to go do this, right? And to your question, Junko, so publicly, I think we've announced a couple deals. We've got a big one coming out of Japan, but I think that's a good example of what customers are asking from us. So we have one customer that wants to build a data center edge type AI device. They are building their own AI, and they've come to us to ask us because they need some compute to go power that, to go feed that AI engine. So they're working with us, and they've asked us to develop a RISC-V chiplet that can work well and work with their AI chiplet that they're going to build concurrently. So that's one example where they've identified RISC-V as where they want to go, and they're looking for a technology partner that has experience both with chiplets, but also getting compute engine to talk to an AI engine. Conversely, I've got another customer from Japan that's asking me for the opposite. They've already selected a CPU partner, probably because they've got a really good deal on a licensing that they've had in place for years, but they're looking for an AI engine that is, flexible and similar, closer to what we're doing here at Tenstorrent, and they've asked for an AI chiplet. So from my perspective, again, it's a case where I've already got both chiplets. I've got the corresponding memory, the corresponding I/O, and we've proven we know how to get them to work together. So our customers see that, and have identified us as a company that can provide them the compute, the AI, have the understanding of chiplets. And then from my side, it's great because once I'm in there with one product, trust me, we've been doing AI for 6 or 7 years now. I know it's not as easy as they'd like to think. I think there's an opportunity to cross-sell and upsell and say, hey, well, how about you look at our AI chiplet as well, with our CPU chiplet, or vice versa. I know you have a CPU chiplet in mind, but if you want to own your own CPU and look at open standards and optimize, customize to a greater extent, why not RISC-V chiplet? So these are the kind of things we're looking at.
Wow, I love the idea of cross-sell and upsell.
A quick question about a multi-foundry strategy. Given the immaturity of chiplet interconnect standards right now, doesn't that raise some real interoperability issues? And is that your responsibility, or is it the foundries, or is it the customers ultimately?
Great question. So with this chiplet strategy, you're kind of going into uncharted waters on a number of fronts. I mean, even if you look at the sales cycle or the quality support or certification, like who's responsible? Is it us? Is it customers today when they're building a chip, they're choosing one partner to go build it for them. I don't think these companies want to go work with 7 different companies, right? Well, here's my memory guy, here's my CPU guy. So I think there's going to be an operation for a consolidation point. Now, selfishly, I think a company like Tenstorrent that's offering the brains, the CPU, the AI, again, we're building our own I/O memory. We've done it all before. I think we have a unique opportunity to be one of those consolidation points. So not only do I expect, but we've seen some of the deals that we've worked out where they've asked us to do, we might not use all of our chiplets, but they've asked us to go put them together and be responsible for them working. That being said, there's also another model that says, well, maybe it's the foundries, maybe it's the EDA guys that are looking at some opportunity there. I think there's a lot of unknowns in which direction this is going, and I think it in the same way that it's a new technology, I think there's an opportunity for business model innovation as well. And in fact, I think that's probably one of the more exciting opportunities. And I think we'll see companies popping up that are responsible for some of this. But Ron, in terms of multi-foundry strategy, that will be a tough one. What I can say is for the product that we're building and the sort of the Gen 1 of our sort of chiplet strategy, we're working to sort of keep that either all in one foundry, or we're doing a lot of work to make sure that interoperability works. And that'll be on us because the first gen product will be my product that we're releasing to market, and we're going to need it to work. It'll be our follow on the black hole. So that will certainly be up to us. And then moving forward, as I said, business model innovation, I think it's exciting because no one really knows.
Well, speaking of business model innovation, it sounds like you have an opportunity here to end up with the revenue for only the chiplets and the responsibility for the entire system, which would be a horrendous mismatch. How do you avoid that happening?
That's another great question. That's something we're pretty thoughtful. I think if I look at, again, I don't want this to be a big sort of PR pitch for Tenstorrent, but hardware's hard. It's in the name, right? And I think what's interesting at Tenstorrent is we've got a sort of industry veterans that have been doing this for a long time. So we're being very thoughtful. We're not just jumping at any sort of revenue opportunity and saying, okay, we're going to go do this. We need the money. Let's go do it. To precisely to avoid those kind of conflicts, Ron, we don't want to be in a situation where we're selling a single chiplet and then, holding the bag if it doesn't work or being responsible. So really what we're looking at right now is the projects that we've taken on, we are primarily in the lead position for developing, delivering that complete package, and we're responsible. And we're also getting, we're how do I say this? We're collecting the revenue to make sure that happens. So right now, although I hope this is the future, and I believe it could be, I do see a future where, I think Jim described it once in a video. You go to a Home Depot and you pick your favorite chiplet off the wall and put it together. We're not quite there yet, and I think it'll be messy for a couple generations. So right now, I think the risk mitigation is the fact that we're taking lead on the projects that we're designing, and we're also ensuring that the work and resources that we're putting into it are properly being compensated. And from the customer's perspective, they're equally as happy because they have a product that they're still getting time to market faster. They're getting it from a company that has silicon ready, silicon proven designs. It's not just like some of our IP competitors. It's not just hypothetical IP on a slide. It's something that is actually in the market and you can test. And I think they see the advantage there because also if they need to go do a different rev or the optimization needs to go in a different direction because the next generation of AI models are using a different sort of architecture, they're able to do that quickly. So it's a win-win for both sides right now.
But it sounds like you guys are actually taking on a lot of things. I mean, that was the beginning of this conversation because, without you taking responsibility for the first generation chiplet products, of course, the customers would be at a loss. And you are in a great position. You use the terminology saying that we control our own destiny, but without you taking a lead, the rest of the customers would not be able to come along with you, right?
Junko, I think you're right, and I think someone has to, right? That's the problem when you have standardization bodies, right? Everyone means well, and you put in all these things, but at the end of the day, someone has to go do it. And I think what is fun for me about Tenstorrent is, I told you, right? We're building. We need to build all these things to go sell our final product, anyways. And unlike, not to pick on anyone, but like ARM, if ARM mysteriously started trying to sell hardware, they'd probably have some pushback from their customers. No comment on what we've seen in the news. Or conversely, it's very hard for NVIDIA and AMD and Intel. I think they dabble in IP, but they've got a huge hardware business to protect. We don't. And frankly, from the start, we're doing everything in the open. Everything's on GitHub. Everything's open standard with RISC-V. So we're able to kind of monetize each, as I said, step along the way. And I think our product, we've chosen to use chiplets for our own benefit, kind of like AMD. But unlike AMD, we then have the ability to slice and dice different steps along the way and go monetize that. So again, I see it as sort of an advantage in diversification. And if I look at my revenue and pipeline, I'm very pleased because not only have I got good AI hardware sales, I've got good IP sales across RISC-V and AI. I've just got this sort of robust portfolio where I don't have all my eggs in one basket, but I'm simply just taking advantage of these different steps that I would have had to do anyways to go build my product. So I've been quite fortunate that we've got such a robust product portfolio to go out there and sell.
Do you think there's a possibility that if you can prove yourselves on the ability to do integration of multi-die modules, that will become as important to your business as chiplets or IP, or even more important?
Very interesting question. I would say that we are certainly thinking about that, and I think there's going to be a need, and it's going to be filled by someone. And like I said, the best part about being in a startup is pivots, right? You never know. It's very unclear, I think, for a startup what their main source of revenue is going to be in the next couple of years. I'll tell you now, IP has been really strong for us. We just started kind of as earning revenue in the last, let's say, 18 months, and IP's been very strong, and that's because it's a longer sales lead, and people are used to buying it a little ahead in advance, right? Our hardware business, I think, is really going to ramp in 25. But as I look out to the future, I think chiplets and the surrounding sort of opportunities around chiplets, precisely to your point, Ron, I think could be, if I was to split Tenstorrent into 3 generations of opportunity, our IP is doing great for us now. Our next sort of big ramp is going to be this hardware. I think chiplets could be even bigger. We don't know, but I certainly think the opportunity is there if we do it right. And I think we're motivated to do it right because that's our hardware business is also going to be dependent on it. And I think that gives us a bit of an advantage over sort of more of a pure play IP guys or folks that don't have silicon ready, silicon tested, silicon proven hardware.
That must also give you an advantage when your investors are looking at their long-term options.
It's you took the words out of my mouth. I always tell people is like, here's our plan through 27, and everyone's, they're excited and they see the opportunity and they believe. And then I end with, and I mean this is, that next, from 27, 28, 29, 30, that's probably your next big bet on Tenstorrent. If we executed successfully to get to here, that means that we've figured out this play in chiplets and how it benefits our own technology. And unlike some of our competition, we're willing to open that up and work with a lot more customers. And that could be sort of the next big opportunity. I agree with you.
I don't want to end this conversation downer, but I still have to ask the questions that I have. What do you see yourselves in the future of Tenstorrent? What could trip you up? I mean, what do you worry about?
Yeah, that's a really good question, right? And I think there's a couple ways to answer it, but one of the opportunities we have is we're able to monetize different parts of the stack, but that also means that we've got competition in every part of the stack, right? And I think if I look at ARM is had a really good run since they went on their IPO, and I think they've publicly started to talk about their, I forget the term they use, droplet or some kind of strategy where it's similar to chiplets. So I think they're in a great place because they've got a very mature IP business. They've got great products, and they've got the ability to leverage some of their existing contracts and existing
Customers,
business
yeah.
partnership. Exactly, to go do that. And same with Nvidia, right? Nvidia is they've made strides into with Blackwell and into that combination CPU and AI. So I think we've got our work cut out for us, especially with sort of the maturity and the breadth or depth, I guess, of our competition. But I'm going to lean into what Jim said, and I was never not a believer. But when I heard, okay, Tenstorrent, we're open source, we're open standard, we're going to do everything in the open, I kind of sort of felt what Ron thought about chiplets. I'm like, okay, it's kind of a marketing gimmick. But I'll tell you, what I've been most surprised about from customer feedback is two things. Number one is that open source, open standard message, doing things in the open is absolutely real. We've had customers and investors that have gone through our entire GitHub software stack. They've purchased our development kits online, installed it in their computers and ran it, and then they've come to us and said, hey, we like what we're doing. We can see everything. We've looked through it. We know what it is, and we want to invest, or we want to become a customer. And for me, that validation is great. And I think that I was a little surprised at how much that has really resonated with our customers and investors, frankly. And then the second part, I sort of underestimated the power of ownership. And I think people are looking what Amazon and Tesla have done in terms of owning their own future from silicon all the way up. And I think when you're looking at that, if you're looking for a team that is North American based, has got some arguably one of the best high performance CPU teams on the planet, with a history and legacy of delivering high performance compute, which is, as the big guys have shown us, not easy to do. There's a bit of an art to getting high performance compute and doing it right with an innovative AI solution. And be able to own that and own your own future and be able to purchase the IP or do everything in the open. That's also been something our customers have been telling us about. So for as much as I worry about the competition and NVIDIA's moat and ARM's sort of power with the customers, I think that the open standard, open source ownership path that we're on is the right one. And I think kind of similar to what we saw with Linux in the old days with Unix moving over to Linux. I think that open source door, as Jim said, is once you go through it, it's really hard to go back. And I think that's going to be our secret weapon moving forward. And I think chiplets is just a natural extension of that because it really helps us with that, here's the right size, open Lego blocks for composability, IP to system, what do you want to go build? So anyways, that's just my thoughts.
Wow, you just wrapped it up. I'm very impressed. Ron, do you have any other additional questions?
But I am curious, both Cadence and Synopsys have a history for lumbering along behind the leading edge of the IP industry and commoditizing the margins out of everything. Do you see that as a threat to you as this industry develops?
We've been working really closely with, we've got great relationships with Synopsys and Cadence. Obviously, right, we've been working with them a lot of us on the team have been working with them for years. I would say that the EDA guys really have to figure out what role they're going to play in this new chiplet ecosystem. And I think similar to the fabs, they're going to be in a battle, I think, with the fabs to figure out which portion of that are they going to keep or they're going to go after. And I think that's very unclear. What I can say is both of those guys have been extremely supportive in what we're doing and shown strong interest in RISC-V and chiplets. I think there's some question marks into the role that they want to play in an ecosystem that doesn't yet exist that they've got to do a lot of thinking about. And I think depending on some of those decisions they're going to make in the next year, it could be a threat, it could be a great partner. That's a little unclear to me right now, but I think they're probably thinking very carefully about what role they're going to play in this chiplet future.
Thank you. That's a very thoughtful answer. Well, thank you so much for your time. Time flew,
Time did fly.
You can actually go through. I'm very impressed. Okay, well, thank you so much. And we'll talk soon then.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Junko Yoshida. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Ojo Yoshida Report. Thanks for joining us. Thanks, for joining us for this special session. It's a Q&A session of the chiplet segment we just broadcasted. And today for this Q&A, originally David Bennett was supposed to be here, but for some urgent business, we have Bob Grimm. He is a vice president of corporate communications, investor relations. Bob is actually one of my favorites. He can answer all your questions. So we got Bob in the room and also Ron Wilson. Ron Wilson, who was in the video asking tough questions to David Bennett. So now Ron gets to ask tough questions to Bob Grimm. But anyway, just for housekeeping, please use the Q&A button on the right-hand side corner of the screen to type in your questions. But meanwhile, we're going to start rolling with various questions. All right. Ron, do you want to take do you want to do the first one? Or I can start. One of the things that I really liked the interview that we did with David Bennett was, it dawned on me for the first time what chiplet is for. In other words, that we have been writing about chiplets for the last, 12 months, 18 months. And we have been always focused on, we got to have some kind of standards so that the idea of chiplet was a Lego block, right? So we need the foundational standards, interfaces, and everything so we can swap one element of the chiplet with another. I always thought that was the goal, and I think it's still the goal. But the way David explained is really that you guys not going to wait for that. I mean, you guys are actually going ahead and create your own solution to show the world what chiplets is going to, how the chiplet is going to work. Is that it?
Absolutely. In fact, we had one of the major foundries in our office yesterday talking about this, and I got to hear our CEO, Jim Keller, speak about it. And you're exactly right. We are forging ahead. We are building our interface for chiplets, and we are going to make that interface available to others because we think it's important to have a functional, usable, reliable interface available when sometimes the standards bodies move too slowly. And one thing that I think David did a nice job of communicating in his session is we're using chiplets to build our products. We believe that approach, that Lego block approach, gives us the ability to build unique products quickly, to build derivative products quickly, to react to markets quickly, and most importantly, to respond to customer needs quickly. So it's I don't think the world really understands what's happening in the silicon design world with chips. I think chiplets is a part of it. I think IP, is a part of it. I think the number of companies developing their own chips is going to really accelerate. And I think that chiplet part of that story is really going to enable a lot of companies to do a lot of different things. But, it is a lot of work too. So.
Bob, do I understand from your recent announcement that you're going to be using Blue Cheetah as the physical layer for your internal interconnect?
Yep.
Is that going to create compatibility problems with the third-party chiplet market as it develops?
Maybe not. So the thing that we're trying to get our heads wrapped around is, will there ever be that market where I can buy this from one company, this from another company, this from a third company, put them all together? That's the dream. I mean, obviously we all want that. The reality is, in the chiplets over the next several years, is it's going to be strong relationships with who you're working with, lots of simulation, lots of hard work done so that that you're confident the chiplets can work. As the standards evolve, I'm sure Blue Cheetah's, products will evolve too. And ultimately, just like everyone else, we think standards are a good thing. But in the short term, since the standards aren't there, we have to forge ahead and build something that we have a lot of confidence in for ourselves. And fortunately, we're seeing that our customers have a lot of interest in it too. So that's always good.
We just got a great question from the audience. The attendee says, I'm a chiplet novice. Can you give me an overview of power management at the module level?
That is a hard no for me. Here's the reason is my background is a software engineer, and then on the business and sales and communication marketing side. So I'm going to be a poor person to talk about power management. But there's no reason, if you want to reach out to me, Bob Grimm at Tenstorrent.com, we can get that answered for you. But I'm unfortunately not the right person to talk power module management.
All right. There's actually another question from Nathan. Nathan is asking, what impact will UCIe have on the chiplet market? Will UCIe 2.0 make a difference? What do you think?
Great question. So UCIe ultimately, if UCIe was going as well as everyone hopes and dreams it will, we'd have a simple, powerful, efficient interface that everyone could standardize on and use. And to your point earlier on, have interconnectivity that is, sort of would make it vendor neutral to which one you go to. And I think the long-term vision is it can still get there. I really do believe that. I think UCIe 2.0 will make a difference. And everything we're doing in a way that doesn't preclude us from, moving closer to the UCIe standards as they continue to evolve and lock in place. But, we saw this with Intel and AMD, right? Anytime there was a standards body, one company would move ahead, and then that company would bring the standards along with them because they had to from a business model. Now, what's happening with chiplets is you have a lot of companies moving ahead. And you have, AMD is probably farther ahead. If not, they're not in the lead. They're far ahead as anybody. The question is which company is going to bring along that definition to match what they're doing? And is it going to be a startup like us? Maybe. Jim's a big believer in open standards, and he's definitely going to make what we're doing available. And we're going to ensure that our voice is part of the conversation. But like anything, this is going to take a while to sort itself out.
I have business questions. Every time when I talk to the Tenstorrent, it's actually eye-opener for me because, as we discussed during the interview in the previous segment, you guys are really in everywhere, and it's sort of David actually brought things all together for me for the first time. You actually need to be in everywhere. not only in order to make money for the time being, bring the revenue in, but the industry itself needs so many different elements, and they just can't, twiddle their thumbs and waiting for, we'll wait for the company A to come up with that chiplet, and I'm going to wait for company B to come up with the standard. You got to be everywhere. Is that it?
We have to be everywhere. I made a comment earlier that I don't think the world really understands how silicon technology is being adopted and used and built. I think the number of companies that are building their own chips has exploded to a level that people just really can't fathom. I think it's one of the reasons you see ARM doing well and their stock being, as positively received as it is. But what we're finding is there are a lot of companies that have multifaceted approaches to their business. You can look at the auto industry like this. You can look at the robotics industry like this. But what you have is you have companies that have needs for whatever it is they're building, their car, their robot, their drone, whatever it is. And they have silicon needs for that. They have training needs that they need a data center for. They have, all sorts of needs that span the gamut of what companies tend to offer. And what we're finding is a lot of them want to have a similar architecture across all those things. So we are attracting a group of customers that have a very diverse need of technology. And the fact that we can license IP, that we can sell chips, that we can sell servers, that we can sell chiplets, it's put us in a really unique position to tackle companies. Because where you see companies going right now is offering tokens on the cloud in the AI hardware space. And frankly, we're scratching our head at that, going, is that really where the market is going, is selling tokens on the cloud for LLMs? Maybe. I mean, we don't know. That's not what we see. But we see a market that's really changing fast and adopting to new technology and new ways to implement technology quickly. And we're really excited to be a part of it. So,
Doing the business side of that for a moment, that model allows you to offer a pretty complete package to a customer, but it also forces you to make fairly deep investments in a whole lot of areas that require different kinds of expertise and different kinds of supply chains. How do you manage that, and how do you fund it without having Elon Musk bankrolling it?
So fortunately, the AI market is very hot. Funding has not been a problem. So from that standpoint, we're set. So we're really good there. But what I'm really enjoying seeing from an internal standpoint is how we manage it. Like, how does Jim, as our CEO, manage that? Because it's hard. And if you think about, I've heard Jim say this, if you think about building a GPU versus a CPU, GPUs don't have to be perfect. At least, especially back in the day, they're drawing vectors on a screen. Back in the days of Denver from NVIDIA, GPUs weren't even deterministic. You could run the same thing 10 times and get slightly different answers each time. I think that's changed as the years have moved on. But, if you look at CPUs have to be completely deterministic. They're much, Jim will say that it's much harder to build a CPU than a GPU. And an AI core, Tensor-based cores, somewhere in between those two. And when you start dealing with the complexity of two types of architectures on the hardware, and then you have multiple software stacks on top of it, it is forcing me to really be thankful that we have a leader like Jim, because Jim is a lifelong learner. Jim's our CEO. Clearly, everybody knows of his background as a silicon architect. But what people don't know is that Jim is a voracious reader. He's a voracious learner. And he is always thinking, how do I make myself a better leader and CEO at Tenstorrent? And the answer, Ron, is he doesn't do it alone. He has a professional coach that helps him. He has people he goes to for advice. He continually learns. And it's even to the point of, he'll have an experience one day, he'll go home and he'll read something, he'll come back in and say, I handled that wrong. We're going to do this. And you really have to be thoughtful when you have something this complex, and I'm very glad he is. But you hit the nail on the head, Ron. It is challenging, for sure.
All right. I think there are more questions coming in. I'm going to take from the one here that, do chiplets require development of new manufacturing equipment and processes? If so, what are the major challenges?
So they do have a different packaging processes, but those processes exist. They exist now. They're being used now, and they're being used, in simple cases from die to die stuff. Like you see, Intel and NVIDIA just basically gluing two dies next to each other in the same package. They don't really even communicate. They're just on the same package. And then you get to more complicated things with where the chiplets, actually, do communicate. But where I think it gets interesting from a chiplet standpoint is, where do we go from here? Like, what's going to be needed in the future? If we get to this level, it puts another step into the supply chain, because you get wafers, you get chiplets. Well, now you've got to have this other kind of packaging process where you take the chiplets, get on chip. And again, not my area of expertise, but it is absolutely given our foundry partners additional complexities to work with, and as well as our teams. So.
Right. There's another question about known good die. The known good die problem, is that an issue? Is still an issue? And how does that compare to other back-end challenges that we see?
So what we're finding with our first chiplets is we're going to build some redundancies into our first chiplets for that, because of this. So we're going to potentially overbuild on some of our 10.6 cores, so that if we advertise a chiplet has 40 10.6 cores, maybe we overbuild it to 46 or 48 to make sure we have enough. But what I think it really does is, I think it gives us a lot more flexibility, because one of the problems is when you chop the wafers into dies, if you get a problem with one of those dies, it's done. The smaller you chop that into, the less of a die you lose when you do have a problem. So I think overall it's going to help us quite a bit. But we're planning for it. It's something that we have to be aware of, and it's something that comes up repeatedly in discussions.
To pursue that for a second, does that mean you have to have a different approach to wafer test to get much better coverage than we're used to, and to activate the self-repair if necessary?
Yep, absolutely. And it also puts extra steps into our proof of concept, because now we're going to be building some proof of concept chiplet chips that are really nothing but testing out the interfaces, right? They're very simple logic on the chip, but what you're really doing is, can these two pieces of logic communicate through the interfaces? So we've got to build those chiplets for I/O, for memory. We've got to simulate CPU. So it complicates things, but we think the benefit really outweighs the risk in the long term.
When you engage with a customer, how soon does the discussion about ultimate yield come up? Or did they just take the naive assumption that their module yield is going to be like SoC yield?
The yield comes up, but it's not a primary concern right now. The primary concern is the logistics of making it work in the cost structure. And usually the yield is factored into the cost structure part of the conversation. I see there's a question there about the automotive market. And I think that yield really is going to become interesting in the automotive market in particular, because if you think about a market that has to have perfect technology, especially when lives are at stake with ADAS, the yield for automotive becomes critical. With our background of our leaders, automotive is a big target market for us, both in the chiplet space and in our IP business. And we think there's a lot of potential there, but it's one of those things we have to do right, because people's lives will depend on it.
Yeah, that actually, this chiplet in automotive, this came up as kind of key questions for a lot of sessions we've had so far. Now, there's another question about 2.5D advanced packaging solutions, right? I think during the session, David corrected me. It's not just Samsung, but we're working with other foundries for for manufacturing and packaging, I think.
Yeah.
So this audience is asking, how do you manage the different 2.5D advanced packaging solutions currently available, like Intel Fabius and TSMC's Cores, and the new solutions coming online? How do you manage that?
By having a lot of experts, Again, I'm not a packaging expert, but I can tell you, when our COO, Keith Wittick, we were talking about this before we came online, he's a bit of a unicorn in the industry in that, he was the one who split off Global Foundries from AMD for Lisa Su. Like, he was the one who drove that. And he knows the foundries. And so anyways, when he built his ops team to come in, I mean, he literally went and picked the people that he thought were the absolute best in the industry at managing this process of going through a factory, going through packaging, going through a fab, through packaging and testing. And so, I think it's kind of the same thing you see from Jim. Like, they bring in the best talent we can and, turn them loose on the problem.
It's obviously it's not one solution. I mean, it's not a one universal solution. You really need to tailor that for different packaging solutions available on the market. Yeah.
You're right. It's not a one solution, and we're using Global Foundries for our current. Not Global Foundries. I'm sorry. We're using TSMC for the product that we're about to launch called Black Hole. Our next product we've announced will be built on Samsung. We've announced a partnership with Rapidus. Our belief is that we need to have a really strong relationship with all the foundries, all the packaging houses, because we need to know who to go to for the right product. And, knowing who to go to and having the right relationship in place can really, really help us deliver quality to our customers and reliability as well. So you're absolutely right. It's a big task and not one to be taken alone.
Given that all those technologies have different physical standards, does this mean you're going to end up with several different versions of each functional chiplet? One for buried bridges and one for Samsung interposer and one for TSMC interposer, for instance?
It's possible. It's possible. Right now, we're thinking of it more of, do we want a 3 nanometer version of this, a 2 nanometer version of that, and trying to keep it simple at that level. But it is conceivable. For example, we do have customers that have specific fab requirements that we work with a specific fab, and so that gets a little adds complication to the mix too when customers have that requirement. So yeah, it's very possible, Ron. That's not many people are astute enough to ask that question. So I'm impressed.
Something you didn't want to get asked, but anyway.
Well, no, it's true. There's nothing to hide about it. It's true.
It's a challenge that you need to deal with.
Yep.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah. All right. There's another question. Aerospace is significantly more stringent than even automotive. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think you're right. Clearly, I think aerospace has a whole nother set of regulations on top of it than you see in automotives, especially if lives are at stake. And I guess lives are at stake anytime something leaves the ground, whether people are on it or not. But I look at aerospace, robotics, and automotive all kind of with the same vein, and is that when you have those industries, while the margins may be different, the margins for error are extremely small. The demand for reliability is extremely high. And, Junko, you wrote that interesting article about this in the automotive space. People, companies have a lot of rigid requirements for testing, validation, and things like that. I don't really necessarily think aerospace is a ton different, because I think the level of perfection needed for automotive is pretty high already. But I'm sure there are more regulations for aerospace than I'm aware of.
Yeah. All right. Very good. We could talk forever, but unfortunately we are out of time. Bob, come back anytime, and I'll call
Thanks
you.
so much for having me. And next
And-
time I'm going to bring my ops sidekick with me so she can answer some of the more technical questions. So we'll have a good time with it.
All right, but before we close, I have one housekeeping announcement that for viewers, you will see on your left-hand side, there's a column, and then it says Tech Pavilion. Click that because Tenstorrent does have its collaterals inside that inside Tenstorrent's own booth. So check that out. And thanks for really lively, insightful questions. Thank you very much. Thanks, Ron. Thanks,
Thank you
Bob.
so much, y'all. Great to see you all. Bye-bye.
Thanks for the question.
Bye.